All right, how about the technology? Bitcoin and Ether are overcapacity. They can't handle this. Okay, so you gotta. I'm sorry to sound frustrated, but if you're new to the conversation, I apologize for that. But oh my God. Okay, you got to start living in a dynamic universe. The universe that you live in is dynamic, and so many mistakes are made because people don't understand that they live in a dynamic universe. I mean, it's not just a dynamic physical universe, it's a dynamic social universe, right? If there's one thing you can get from this conversation tonight, it's a dynamic universe. It's the old saying that says, whatever rule you propose, imagine your very worst enemy is using it against you. Right? Imagine your very worst enemy is using it against you. Right? So, oh, hate speech. Okay, well, hate speech, that sounds bad. Okay, well, imagine if what you honestly say and believe and can prove even gets classified as hate speech and you get handed out in the public square or maybe into jail for all I know, right? Well, that's the reality, right? So a dynamic universe in the world of Bitcoin is, yeah, sometimes Bitcoin can be kind of slow. But if you just take that, well, Bitcoin is just slow. There's a lot of movement in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is, sorry, I don't mean to mock you, right? It's kind of rude. But what you're thinking is like, well, we have this fixed thing called Bitcoin, and it's slow. And you know, as the number of transactions goes up, it's just going to get slower. But that's not living in a dynamic universe. A dynamic universe is, okay, Bitcoin has a challenge. Bitcoin is not a thing. Bitcoin is an ecosystem. It has a challenge. And the challenge is, yeah, it can be kind of slow, and it can be kind of expensive to process your transactions. So that's going to cut into the value of Bitcoin. But now that we have close to $1 trillion of value invested in Bitcoin, do you think people are just going to let it, oh, it's just so slow? Well, I guess I'll just watch my however much money evaporate, because no, they're working on the Lightning Network. There's Bitcoin Cash, which forked off. There's a whole bunch of work that's being done to try and improve the speed and nimbleness of Bitcoin. People aren't going to just let their entire value and investment in Bitcoin go tits up because it's getting kind of slow at times. They'll figure out a way to make it faster, to make it better, to have it work well, and just live in a, 24,000 transactions every 10 minutes is nothing. So, got to remember, you're living in a dynamic universe. You're living in a dynamic universe. And just look at your own life. Look at your own day. Look at your own day to figure that out, right? If you're home, let's say it's the summer, you're home, and you notice a whole bunch of ants crawling around your back door. Well, did you just sit there and say, well, I guess that's it for the foundations of the house? No. You call an exterminator, you do what you need to do to get rid of the ants or the termites or whatever it is, right? People respond and change their behavior based upon the information that they're receiving. So don't sit back in life and say, well, the problem is that Bitcoin is right? Okay, there's almost $1 trillion of worth invested in Bitcoin. People aren't just going to say, it's like, you bought a house. Oh, well, there are termites here, so I guess the foundation of the house are going to get eaten away. It's like, no. Just as you change your behavior based upon things happening around you. Like when you're driving and some jerk pulls out of a driveway, what do? Do you just crash into him? Well, no, you change your speed. You hit the brakes. You swerve to the other lane. Whatever, right? You honk your horn. You change your behavior based upon that which is threatening your interests. You change your behavior to pursue some enhanced or new interest, right? You change your behavior. So just really, really understand this. Don't look at the world like it's an oil painting. It's not. It's not a photograph. It changes dynamically based upon the inputs. If the inputs are Bitcoin is too slow, the output will be people will find a way to accelerate it. And people aren't just going to give up on the entire value of everything that people have poured 10 years of their life and like into Bitcoin. They're not just going to watch it go tits up. So yes, whatever criticism you have, and it's fine to have those criticisms. It's fine to have those criticisms. I think it's totally fine. Wonderful. But don't imagine that people aren't going to find a way to solve this. The Bitcoin community is composed of just about the most brilliant and economically and ideologically motivated human beings on the planet. Bet against them at your freaking peril. Because Bitcoin is not just an alternative currency. It's not just a store of value. It's not just a cool public ledger. Bitcoin is a passionate FU to the powers that be. Bitcoin, as I've argued publicly in speeches many years ago, Bitcoin is the potential end to war, to hyperinflation, to intergenerational debt. Bitcoin is a mission of mercy to the future. Bitcoin is the Jesus to the new converts of the religion of peace called crypto. Bitcoin is the people regaining control over their currency for the first time in the history of the world. Bitcoin is currency democratized, unpoliticized, unpredatored. Bitcoin is a currency that serves the people at the expense of the parasites, rather than the currency which serves the parasites at the expense of the people at the moment. Bitcoin is rescuing your precious labor from being hoovered up endlessly by the invisible vampire mosquitoes of central banking. Bitcoin is about as passionate a calling for the people involved in that community as anything you've ever seen in life, and by that I also include the people who cut their own balls off to try and hitch a ride on the Halley-Bopp comet, okay? These people are seriously brilliant, beautifully, derangedly committed to the future of peace and plenty that Bitcoin could represent, and will, I believe, when it reaches its full fruition, which it's a hell of a long way from doing. The people who were early on in the internet were like, wow, this is really cool, it's going to help free speech, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. That was wonderful. But free speech was already a concept. This expansion of the internet, yeah, it did help with free speech. That's why we're talking now. I think it's wonderful. But it was an extension of an existing principle. What we understand as currency now is slavery. The currency is summoned into existence at the expense of your children's futures. What you think of as a dollar sign is a slow, jugular-sucking noose twined and twisted around the necks of your children. They're sold for another fucking yacht, for another fucking asshole in the here and now. They're on the block internationally. Jeez, there's a new group against human trafficking being formed in the United States at the moment. Against human trafficking, fantastic. But the real human trafficking is the national debt, where your children are sold, usually across international lines, so that politicians can stuff their asses with money in the here and now and shower a little bit down on the people, so the people will overlook what intergalactic assholes the politicians are. That's the new slavery. That's the new human trafficking. It's the economic blood and future of your children. You need to understand the Bitcoin space. The passion that these incredibly brilliant people have brought to bear on the oldest human problem. How do you store value so that thieving, predatory, vampiric assholes can't get their jugular-sucking tentacles on it at all times? How do you store value so that you can actually come back to it? It's an old movie. It's not that old, I suppose. Into the Wild. And the guy kills some animal and stores it by a river, comes back a day or two later, and there are flies eating it. And he can't eat it. He couldn't store that. Didn't have a fridge. He couldn't store the value. Civilization is all about the storing of value. You don't have a pen and paper, you can't write down Shakespeare. That all gets lost. You don't have recording equipment. You can't get the beautiful singers and songs down. They're gone. There's an oral tradition, but it twists and turns in a game of schizophrenic epileptic telephone. The store of value is civilization. Why it was so horrible when the Library of Alexandria was burnt down. It was horrible when people lose their YouTube channels. The mighty pillar of philosophy, free domain radio on YouTube, vanished. All the comments vanished. All of the associations vanished. All the arguments, all the debates, gone. And the leaders of YouTube will be cursed in the future for the great store and sum of human interactions that vanished in the most crucial time in modern history and one of the greatest times in the history of philosophy. They will be viewed as, rightly so, as barbarians who torched a library. So when you're talking about, well, Bitcoin has a shortcoming, Bitcoin has a problem, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm all about identifying problems. How do you store value? That's civilization, you understand? And Bitcoin is about how you store value so that other assholes can't get their fucking hands on it. They just can't. You put your money in the bank, inflation eats it away. You store your meat by a river, the flies lay their eggs in it, and you can't eat it. You got gold coins in Rome, they put all kinds of bimetallic shit into the gold and destroy its value in your hand. How do you store value? Jams? Pickles? All of this is about storing value. Preserves, fridges, it's all about storing value. How much would you have to work if you didn't have a fridge or a store to go get your food? It's crazy. You ever wander around the woods thinking, oh my God, if I need 2,500 calories a day from here, all I'm doing all day is chasing calories. How do you store value? God, look at the books, look at everything, look at your playlist. Do you know how much value you have stored on your phone in terms of art, music? All the stuff that's stored, I mean the stuff you can access, but you know, let's say you got some playlist down, you got a couple of hundred songs, a couple of thousand songs. How much value is stored there? Almost incalculable. We only have a civilization because people figured out how to store value. Why does a farmer grow more than he needs to live? Big fundamental question. Can't have a city. Can't have scholars. Can't have priests. You can't have anybody who's not directly involved in the production of food if you don't have farmers growing more than they need to consume. Go to a farmer's market, right? These days the farmers aren't very thin, to put it mildly, right? So the why is the farmer selling you some corn? Because he's got enough. He's got more than enough, so he can sell you the excess. So if the farmer doesn't know how to store value, you're dead. You understand? Unless you're a farmer. So in the times of the Dark Ages, in the times of general predation, the warlord state, the nature-red and tooth and claw Hobbesian state of nature, nobody can store anything. If you're some farmer and you produce more crops than you need, and you try and trade or sell, word gets around, and next thing you know, every asshole that gives the basis for the centaur myth comes riding down out of the mountains and takes your shit. You can't store it. You can't store value the moment you have anything of excess. Assholes will come and take it away. Which they still do. It's called taxation, obviously, right? Yeah. When I dated a woman whose family was from Bombay, now Mumbai, I would be excited or happy or proud about something. And I'd be jumping up and down. I got some good mark. I wrote a great play. I'm jumping up and down. I'm so happy. Things are great. I'm doing so well. And do you know what you would say? Oh, black tongue, don't say it. Don't say it. And she was kind of half joking, but half serious. Don't show your good fortune. Don't share your good fortune. Don't be happy. Don't show you have any access. Why? Because the gods will watch. And whatever you are cheerful about having gained, word will get out. Thieves will come in the night and you will lose it all. You can't store anything. Everything we have is to store. Why do you have a computer? Because you saved some money. And you were able to save your money because you had some belief that the value you saved would be able to buy something in the future. Why do you have anything in excess of what you need to live? Why did you buy a house? Because you believe that you'll be able to keep that house. People aren't going to just come along communist style and take it away from you. The storage and retention of value is everything in life. And because we need it so desperately in order to have a civilization, that need is used against us in the form of government-created, unbacked bullshit, pretend money. The monopoly money that comes from the monopoly state. Because we're so desperate to have a little bit more than what we've made to survive, which is civilization, we end up putting up with the bullshit, insult to Kleenex, nose wipe, artificial, pretend, fiat currency. Now, people in the Bitcoin space, they may not understand it quite as deeply or as widely or hopefully eloquently as I've laid it out here, but they understand that by creating something which can store value outside the state, store value outside the state, that is a revolution the likes of which we have never, ever, ever, ever seen before in human history. If shells on some island are the currency, and you need 3 shells a day to live, and you have 4 shells, someone's going to come and take that 4th shell, and then tomorrow you won't bother getting 4th shell. You just stick with 3 shells, and nothing will ever progress because nothing ever gets saved and stored up in value. Nothing ever gets built because everything you build is going to be taken away. Imagine, everything you build is going to get taken away. I mean, it's happening now, you understand. Everything you have built is already taken away. Everything you build is already taken away. By unfunded liabilities, national debts, inflation, everything you build is already taken away. You're just allowed to have it for a little while to give you the illusion of that it's worth going to work tomorrow. Yeah, you can have a house. Yeah, fine, you can have a house. I mean, it's not your house. You've got to pay the government every year to keep it. And the government put it in so much debt, and you in so much debt, that it's going to be owned by some foreign bankster at some point, or the entire currency is going to collapse. We'll go back to savage gangs, and you'll lose your house. You pretend you have a house. You pretend you have electricity. You pretend you have a car. You pretend you have everything. You have nothing. You know this 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy? You know you own nothing now. In fact, you owe. You don't own, you owe. You're only allowed to pretend to own something so that you'll get up and go to work tomorrow. That's it. That's it, man. Like in the past, why did the serfs go to work? They were bought and sold with the land. Why did slaves go to work? There were theological reasons. God has appointed the Lord over you. To obey him is to obey God, is to obey virtue. You'll get into heaven. You're basically a piece of human livestock, but if you obey this guy, you'll get into heaven. And if you don't, we'll throw you in jail. The master race, the slave races in the ancient world. So, you don't have anything. You don't own or have anything other than the illusion of ownership which keeps you on the treadmill. If you genuinely understood how much debt was taken out on your behalf just because you're fucking breathing, if you genuinely looked at that math, and you can find it pretty easily, you got to just look at, this is one of the things, I'm going to say it radicalized me, it just It's just a fact. My daughter's born into over $1 million of debt. Well over $1 million of debt. Is she free? What kind of system treats babies as collateral? What kind of fucking system treats babies as collateral? The unborn, their dreams and hopes and futures and opportunities. What kind of fucking system, what kind of monster is in charge of that system? Look at a baby and say, oh man, we can profit from this. Oh, we can make a bunch of money from this pink squalling little life form. What kind of reptilian overlord space aliens? I can understand why people have these fantasies. Look at a baby staring with tenderness into its mother's eyes as he suckles on the breast, learning to use his arms, and says, oh, we can put that kid to work. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We can borrow based upon that kid's slave job in the future. That's a really... I mean, we could actually go out and work for a living, but hell with that. Let's just use babies as collateral. That's what we're going to do. Your babies are debt slaves. You're a debt slave. You own nothing. You own nothing. Unless you own some Bitcoin. Now, the fact that people owe everything and own nothing, the fact that money is debt, the fact that working is serfdom, it's kind of an insult to serfdom. Serfs got to keep more than you and I do. Slaves got to keep more than you and I do. It's estimated that slaves got to keep 70 to 80% of their productivity. When was the last time you saw a net cumulative 20 to 30% tax rate? Not counting unfunded liabilities, not counting all the taxes that cluster around you like mosquitoes. Not counting debt. You've never seen that in your lifetime, and neither have I. So Bitcoin, you understand? Bitcoin says you can own something. You can actually fucking own something. And that ownership is not a lie. It's not a carrot that's an illusory carrot that's out there jumping ahead of you to make sure that you stay on the fucking treadmill and serve your financial overlords. It's actually something you own. Never happened before. It's never happened before in human history. Why do you think I was so keen on Bitcoin from the very beginning? I remember the first time I actually owned something. It was a Winnie the Pooh book. It was given to me by my aunt. It had my name in it. And I remember, I was like 4 years old. I remember walking down the street holding this book. It's mine. It's mine. Did I own my YouTube channel? No. Didn't own it. The moment I displeased the powers that be, I'm gone. Did I own my Twitter account? No, I didn't own it. I'd homesteaded it. I'd created it. I'd poured 40,000 hours into these things. Fruits of 15 years of labor. I didn't own it. Now, if it had been on the blockchain, I'd still would own it, the work that I do on the blockchain. And I do have blockchain-based social media accounts. Because I'd like to fucking own something before I'm dead. I'd like to own something more than the coffin they wrap me in. Don't you want to actually have something that's yours at some point in this godforsaken life? Don't you want to actually have something that can't be taken away from you? Don't you want to have money that doesn't evaporate? Don't you want to have things that can't be taken away from you by men in blue with guns anytime? You want to own something? Ownership is life. Storage of value is civilization. If you don't own things, you're not free. Property rights are human rights. They are one and the same. If you don't own yourself, if you don't own your computer, if you don't own your website, if you don't own your publications, you have no free speech. If you can't own a pen and paper, you can't write down anything, and if you can't transmit it, nobody else can read it or hear it. If you don't have the right of ownership and transfer, you have nothing. You have nothing. Property rights and human rights are the same thing. There's no distinction. It's not even that there's not a dime's worth of difference between them. They're the same thing. Now, Bitcoin, and by that I also mean associated public ledgers and cryptos. Bitcoin is property rights without the state, and property transfer without the state. Decentralized, anonymous if you want it, publicly verified, incorruptible, incontrovertible, undilutable. It's pure whiskey. You can't piss in it and think you're making whiskey. And because it is property rights decentralized, it is human rights solidified. Property decentralized, and by that means not enforced by a central government, because the enforcement of property rights through a central government is a complete contradiction. Because if I have to give up half my property in order to protect my property, guess what? My property is not being protected. It's like saying, well, you know, I'm going to preserve your bodily integrity, but I'm going to have to saw off your arm. It's like, I don't really think you're preserving my bodily integrity if you have to saw off an arm. And if people got to point guns at me for 50% of my money in order to protect my property, while at the same time selling me, my children, their children into intergenerational debt slavery, forgive me just a little fucking bit if I don't feel my property rights and my human rights are being ably defended in this scenario. It's not happening. It's a delusion. It's like saying to the slave, well, at least I'm keeping you free of competitive forces. You know, when they would just hobble a slave, like cut through his Achilles tendon so he couldn't run, it was just a brute exercise. I didn't lie to the guy and say, well, I'm here to protect your freedom of movement by hobbling you. Come on. Protect my property by taking half of it and selling 150% of it in future debt. That's how propagandized we are. You think you own something. You don't. Unless you got a crypto. Then you own something. Now, yes, people can come and take it away. I get all of that. Yes, but that is the difference between an accident and torture. You know, if you work out and you eat well, maintain a healthy weight, don't smoke, don't drink too much, does that mean you're immortal? No. Does that mean you'll live to age 90? No. No. You might not live to the end of this broadcast for all you know, or all I know. I might die too. But dying of natural causes is inevitable, and it's just a risk of life. Being tortured to death is a whole different matter. So yeah, you could lose your cryptos, somebody could steal them through force or something like that, right? Not through hacking, usually. I mean, you got them in exchange or whatever, right? But that's a risk of just being in society. In the same way you could be in a safe neighborhood and still be robbed, right? That's just a risk of living in society. But it's not institutional. It's not baked into the very nature of a statist society where you're going to wake up tomorrow and, yeah, half your day is going to be working for assholes so they have collateral to sell you and your children into more slavery. So please understand, Bitcoin is the new abolitionist movement. Abolitionist was the end of slavery, which is the birth of the modern world. End slavery, bring in wages, you get labor-saving devices, and you get the modern world. There is no modern world without the end of slavery, and there's no future world without the end of debt slavery. There was physical slavery, now there's debt slavery. And that's what it's all about. Before, you couldn't store value because you were a slave. All of your excess production was taken away from you, and you were given a little shack and some shitty dentistry and some bad food. Couldn't save anything. Now you think you can save something, but you can't. You got some savings? Oh, sorry, hyperinflation hit. All gone. This is the story of the guy in the Weimar Republic. Saved his whole life. Saved his whole life. So that he could retire a little early. He had a hard job. And then he wants to retire, takes all the money out of the bank, walks across the street, and it's just enough for a cup of coffee. That the money was dissolving in value as he crossed the street. There were people racing around with wheelbarrows full of money, trying to buy something, anything, to trade in barter before the money evaporated into nothing, because they just printed the shit out of that money to pretend to pay their war debts. What did the Germans own? What did the French own? What did the Romans own? Nothing! They owned the illusion of ownership, which actually made them more slaves because they continued to peddle like mad to buoy up the predatory, spine-dissolving civilization, anti-civilization, that was feeding them into the slow chipper of international finance, back then as it is now. So you got people, yeah, they're making some money from Bitcoin. I get that. But that's what happens. And people are getting this smell, this scent. It's very unfamiliar. It's like, have you ever been in a foreign country and there's some dessert you've never even heard of, and you smell and you're like, damn, that's good. What is that? It's not pie. It's not profiterole. It's not, what the hell is that? God, that's good. And it turns out to be some freaky thing that you've never seen before, and you taste it and you're like, damn, this is like nothing before, and it's incredible. This is like nothing before, and it's incredible. And people are getting that scent. You understand? People are getting that scent. It's really incredible. And the scent is freedom, ownership, the store of value, property rights, human rights, independence of the squid system that beak claws our jugulars into spurting blood from our future. That's what people are. That's why the value of Bitcoin is going through the roof. Because people are like, holy shit. I can fucking buy my way out of slavery? I can actually own something? Something could be mine? It's the smell of a dessert we've never had as a species before. Anytime people have been productive, the government has taken over the currency and turned them from workers into slaves. So Bitcoin is the new abolitionist movement. But instead of getting rid of debt, of direct slavery, they're getting rid of debt slavery. Now, the abolitionists won. Anyone who bet against the abolitionists lost. Clawing our way out of the bottomless Dantean quicksand of manipulated debt. It's not going to be easy. As soon as people really figure out that, you know what Bitcoin is? Bitcoin is the biggest jailbreak in human history. You understand? Bitcoin is the biggest jailbreak in human history. Because we're getting out of the debt farm. We're getting out of the tax dungeons. We are regrowing our tendons and taking to the fucking hills. People are getting out. My most famous video, The Story of Your Enslavement. The world is a series of tax farms. Except in Hungary, where people under 25 don't have to pay tax, so they can actually have some families, have some children. Bitcoin is the biggest jailbreak in human history. We could smell that dessert, even though it comes to us from the future. From a cook in a kitchen and in a set of ingredients we barely comprehend. It's the biggest jailbreak in human history, and people are pouring out of the prison. People are pouring out of the prison, of the fiat, of the prison, of no ownership, of the prison, of debt bankster serfdom. We are sniffing the air. From which direction the greatest food smell is coming from, and we're following it as fast as we fucking can. Do you understand what's afoot? It's the end of all that was before. All that was bad that was before, in the same way that the end of slavery was the end of all that was bad that had gone before. Entire societies, for 150,000 years, all founded on slavery. We didn't fix slavery, we shifted it to tax and debt serfdom. The elites found that if we believed we owned things, that we'd work that much harder. The shift from slavery to taxation was based on the fundamental delusion that we own things, oh, therefore we're going to work harder. But all we're doing is working to get ourselves further in debt. That's all we're doing. And our children and their children. It's got to end. It's got to stop. It has to. War is based on debt. Many years ago I did a public speech on how war is impossible with Bitcoin. It doesn't mean conflict is impossible. There will be always conflict. There should be. It's how we progress. You know, you only get muscles from conflicting with gravity, right? Getting into a dark room and moving metal. But crypto represents the potential for the end of all the predations and depredations that came before. And we will be left merely with individual criminality, not institutionalized hypercriminality. You got the mafia, which is organized crime, and you got the state, which is disorganized crime. This movement is as big as anything has ever been before. And the world that we get, like if you go back to the world of slavery, 16th, 17th, 18th century in many places. You go back to the world of slavery, and then you go forward a couple of hundred years, they wouldn't have any clue where the hell they were. You go back a couple of thousand years, yeah, you know, it's not wildly different, right? You got ships, you got farms, you got hand implements, you got whatever, right? It's not a massive amount of difference. There's been some art and culture along the way, but you take someone from the 17th, 18th century and you put them back in ancient Rome, it wouldn't be like, what the hell is they wouldn't be full of incomprehensible technology either way. But you take the slavery and you take the pre-freedom and post-freedom world, separated by 200 years. Incomprehensible. There is no... You take someone from the early 1800s and you put them to now. It's 200 years and change. They don't know anything about what's going on. They don't know lights. They don't know electricity. They don't know computers. They don't know the internet. They don't know airplanes. They don't know cars. They don't know spaceships. And about 10 other million things. They don't even know what a hypodermic needle is. They don't know what a condom is. They don't know what a windmill is, a wind farm is. They don't know any of these things. They don't know what nuclear power is. No clue. Like, that's how much things can change. And for 150,000 years, we didn't have that change. We got rid of slavery, and within 200 years, the world is absolutely unrecognizable. And we're there. We're there now, again. God bless you people. Thank you. Like everyone who's listened, everyone who's built, everyone who's challenged, everybody who's evangelized, everybody who's risked, everybody who's pumped, everybody who's talking about it. Yes, you can make some money. I mean, we think that making money is selling Bitcoin. No, making money is having Bitcoin, because what you sell it for isn't money. It's debt. Now, I know you need the debt. You need the fiat currency. You got to pay your taxes, and I get all of that. But whatever, right? But this could be the end of debt slavery. Because you can't just print Bitcoins out of nothing. And you don't need the state to maintain ownership. And nobody can just take your Bitcoins. And Bitcoins store value, which is the essence of civilization. So we are at the tipping point here. Now, after many years, 10 years plus, about 150,000 when you think about it, we can finally have an asset that is not also a liability. You own $1, you own $10 in debt. You think it's an asset, but it's a liability. More like 20. We can finally have an asset that's not also a liability. It is something and not its opposite at the same time. More of its opposite. We can finally have a medicine that is not also poison. We can have ownership, which is not also enslavement. So when people say, well, there's this or that little problem with Bitcoin, I invite you to step back a little and look at the big picture. This could be the true foundations of human liberty. Liberty from tyrannical institutions, liberty from debt, liberty from war. Liberty from being owned, the liberty to actually own, to have, without the desire to have being fashioned into a noose for our children. This could be it, man. Certainly the best chance we've ever had. So yes, guess what? There's some growing pains. There were some growing pains when we ended slavery too. But let's look at the big picture, people. All right.